Welcome to the Busy Fit podcast. Welcome to the Busy Fit podcast. Today, we're going to give you 3 easy steps to focus on fat loss and improving your health, whether you are someone that was an ex-college athlete or you're someone just that used to be fairly active and you're not active anymore. Maybe life got in the way, or you started having a family or got busy into work, or maybe you just never really understood how to transition into being a normal person. After coaching over 600 ex-college athletes, there's a lot of common themes that we'll notice from one person to another, as far as like what that transition actually looks like. And so before we dive into those 3 steps, which are really going to just kind of lay out the blueprint for you to actually be able to do it yourself, it's important to frame up, that college experience and that athlete experience and really what that means and how it impacts your day to day. The first thing to think about is if you're someone that's been competitive since you were before even 10 years old, like you may have been 6 or 7 when you got into competitive sports. Maybe it wasn't the sport that you stayed in, but you were in that competitive environment. You already had a coach. You had someone planning out your workouts. You had someone providing you a plan of how to actually go about training and how to actually get better. And it's crazy to think that as you are a 6, 7, 8 year olds, like you're already having that plan in place. But think about it as if you're someone that had that structured sport environment versus someone that never had that. Recess and being active and those types of things was a leisure activity. It was something that you got to choose whether you went down the slide or you threw a football, because it was something that you just enjoyed doing versus have to fit in what actually needs to happen to help you improve in that sport. So as you start off pretty young in the sport, it is a little bit more play-based, but you're trying to stay within that structure. And as you continue to get older, you get more and more in depth in that process. And as you go into like travel sports or you go into club sports or maybe even just into high school and you're kind of like pre-college during that transition, it's very specific. You want to learn the techniques and skills to help you in that specific sport. And that's an amazing thing to help you get to the next level, be competitive, whether you're trying to like make it to a college team or you're trying to, make it to Olympic trials or onto the varsity squad, or maybe you're trying to start in your sport. You're like diving further and further into kind of a one track of like, this is what it takes to be the best you can be at your health and like what that means for performance. So you have more experience than anyone else when it comes to actually training and writing programs and understanding like what you're actually doing. But the issue with that is you're very much into a niche of like, this is the thing that I know how to do really well. And as you dive further into it, those layers get added on even thicker. So you get in high school and all of a sudden you have like a head coach and you have assistant coaches and you probably have an athletic trainer that's at the school that's making sure you're staying healthy. You're having some sort of support around you as far as meals being provided by family or, whatever structure you have in place. Then you get to college and kind of depending on what level you're in, like if you're a D3 athlete, I'm trying to say one's better than the other, but it's more so just talking about the actual experience itself. If you're a Division 3 athlete, a lot of those responsibilities do fall on you. There's a little bit less, highly involved coaching. You may not have had a strength coach, or you may not have a dietitian working with you. And so you're kind of in that middle ground, but you're still doing everything towards being a little bit more competitive. And as you kind of go like Division 2, it gets a little more serious, more assistant coaches, more structure. And you go to a Division 1 athlete, where it's like you have an athletic trainer, you have dietitians, you have strength coaches, you have head coaches, you have assistant coaches. You have that entire structure in place to really help support you and to make sure that you're the best that you can be in your sport. And you're learning a lot about how to be the best at that one sport. But when you're really like dialing back and you're thinking about like after graduation and focusing on how to be healthy, it's easy to get in the aspect of like, and we've talked about this a million times, but into the aspect like this is the way for you to get better. And it's always been about your sport specifically. And that's the most frustrating aspect of that for me is the fact that you get all of this skill around like business and how to develop your resume and how to apply for jobs and how to network and do all of these things. And they're like, okay, like let's purely focus on that because that's like what education, I guess, is supposed to be about. But the reality is like that's such a small portion of it, because if you're not healthy, confident, feeling energetic, like feel like you can actually attack your life and get the most out of it, like you used to feel as an athlete, all of those things aren't going to allow you to be your best self. And so you have to be able to like know how to maintain to do that. Well, everything in the college athletics and like college world is designed towards that professional environment. It's like completely forgetting that health aspect of it. So you've been diving fully into your sport for so long that like if someone walked up to you 6 weeks or 6 months after graduation, they said, hey, say you're a basketball player and like I really want to learn how to shoot better free throws, you could probably take that person and teach them like, hey, yeah, like I know how to shoot better free throws and I can teach you that skill. But if you look at it and say like, okay, hey, apply everything you've done for the last 15 years and just try to write a program for you that's going to help you be healthy, maintain confidence, build muscle, ultimately kind of have the body composition that you want. Because I think one thing that's really important for ex-athletes to identify. So once you've been an athlete, you're always going to identify as an athlete. And so the second you start to no longer have that athletic body, that athletic energy, that athletic confidence, your life changes and impacts everything that you do. And that's such a big area that is missed. And, I think a lot of people think like, okay, it's acceptable to no longer be in that same shape, which it is, but not in a sense of if it actually impacts how you feel about yourself and how you go about your life and being a high performer like you used to be. And so if you don't have the skills in place to be able to write that program or to understand what you need to do nutritionally or what your life balance should actually be like, because you don't need to do the whole 5 a.m. workouts or 20 hours a week anymore. You just need to actually be able to enjoy your life, be healthy, and maintain that confidence. So hopefully some semblance of the shape that you were in so you can feel like an athlete for the rest of your life. That's what you have to be able to do. And everything you've done has always been about athletic performance. And now it's so much more about like just being able to fit that into your lifestyle. So we'll go ahead and dive into those 3 steps that'll help you lose fat, ultimately understand kind of how to balance your life and feel better about your health overall. And the first one, and this one's probably going to be incredibly controversial because you'll see the argument that like you can't impact your metabolism itself, and that's like a trigger word or what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost a buzzword in a sense of like, okay, like metabolism, something you actually can't really do a lot about. But the reality is it's not so much about the metabolism itself, but it's how it changes after you've left competition. You're going to have reduced activity, different nutritional needs. You're not going to be putting in the same training that you've had before. And so the way your body responds to it's going to be different. Even the breakdown of like what you're eating throughout the day is going to be incredibly different when you're thinking about being an athlete versus being a normal person. And that's the most important thing to start with. And we always call it like the gatekeeper, where it's like if your metabolism's not in a place where you're able to kind of just like reset that to being a normal person versus being an athlete, like you're going to struggle right off the bat because you're going to need to not eat as much as you used to. What you eat needs to look different. The timing of your meals has always been around competition. So all those things, you remove all that. And it's like, how do we actually like live as a normal person that we've never had? I'm sure there's personal trainers, like people that are in the space that were not athletes and think like, well, like it's not that different, and they're wrong. Like if you haven't been an athlete, you have no idea what it means to be an athlete and how that impacts your transition into the real world. And so the first thing you have to start with is finding like what's that maintenance actually look like. And then once we are at that maintenance, like how does our body respond to it? Do we have low energy? Do we not sleep well? Do we have underlying adrenal fatigue? Do we have some binge eating habits in place because we would have a hard training session and go to the dining hall and just eat until we were full? Like there's so many little elements of that have to be solved first. And the problem you see is like we have some clients that are amazing where like they're super proactive. They're within their first year or two of graduation, and they're like, they recognize those problems around balancing their health and understanding how to get their metabolism to a good spot and how to actually maintain that shape. And they fix the habits early, which is amazing. But if you don't recognize that stuff, or maybe you recognize it and you don't do anything about it, like you go 5, 10, 15 years down the line, those problems get harder and harder to fix. And the thing that comes up often, and athletes know better than anyone, is like you practice and you are building permanent. You're not building perfect. And so after you finish being an athlete, you had some maybe unhealthy habits or habits that were designed for athletes and not for a regular person. Well, those habits continually become permanent of who you are and what you identify with. And so as you are 5, 10, 15 years removed away from your sport, those things get more and more difficult to break. And again, we mentioned like binge eating, we mentioned, feeling like you've been restrictive for a long time. And all of these things tie into how your body responds to food, how your body actually is prepared for the activities of a day, how you sleep. And if you don't solve those things first, it's kind of like everything else you do is pointless. If you're not having good energy levels, if you're not sleeping well, or you're binge eating, or you're just having some of those habits that were a part of your life as an athlete, and you're trying to apply that, like if you're trying to build muscle or burn fat or lose weight, whatever that thing is, like you're not really going to be able to do that if that's not figured out first. So that's the most important thing to start with. And it's easy to say like, hey, yeah, like balance your metabolism and that'll solve all of your problems. But it really does take kind of just looking at your life as a whole. And so I like to kind of break it down into a few different categories. We'll look at sleep, look at how you wake up in the morning, how you fall asleep at night, whether you stay asleep. And then are you someone that needs 2 cups of coffee in the morning, or are you someone that needs that afternoon pick me up? Or does your energy level fluctuate throughout the day? Do you have really high stress levels? Are you reactive to a lot of different things? All of those things, kind of indicate underlying problems first. And those are the most important thing to focus on. Now we can dive like really deep into how to improve your sleep. And we've done that before, but just like message me on Instagram if you want like our sleep guide or something like that, or we have a couple of trainings around it. So I can just like send that over to you, because that's like, I could talk about it for 2 hours and that's not really the point of the podcast today. So if you want more help around sleep, just send me a message on that specifically and we'll get that over to you. But as far as like what you look at past that, it's really like, what are you doing nutritionally and what habits do you have in place, that need to be focused on first. I love sleep because it's a really good indicator for everything as a whole, but you also need to look at like, how many meals are you having in a day? What do those meals consist of? What cravings do you have? How do you view food as a whole? Because all of those things impact how your metabolism responds to everything. And when you think of metabolism, like, you think like that's just nutrition, but everything feeds into that. The workouts that you do, and we'll get to that in a minute, the way you sleep, the way you manage stress, the way you manage your schedule, the type of training that you do, even how you view your training and how you view the outcomes of your life can all impact that. So metabolism is much broader, but it's the easiest thing you can focus on first to improve your health. So step 2, build muscle to burn fat, is probably like the most buzzword thing there probably like that you've ever heard. But it looks very different for an ex-athlete, because an ex-athlete, you've had 20 hours a week of training, and you're never again in your life, after you train 20 hours a week, you're never going to meet that stimulus again unless you're trying to be a competitive athlete. So things need to look very different. And you kind of have to do a little bit of a reset and recognize like you don't have to train that intense all the time. There has to be progressive overload. There has to be, some stimulus there for you to respond to. But it kind of starts with the recovery process a lot of the time. So if you're someone that training was really intense, it's like you probably need a period of lower intensity and then progressively building back up from there, and kind of re-establishing what a maintenance actually looks like. As far as the exercise piece, it's like, let's start off light. Let's start off like 3 days a week, 30 to 45 minutes, and like break it down, where we're just like trying to get a little better every week. And I don't like to think of it as like setting a standard there for everyone, but look at like, what have you done since you graduated, and then where are you at now, and how can we make it where you feel good first, and then we add on top of that. Because if you start with, we're just going to throw like really intense, strict training at you, but you're coming out of highly intense efforts and you're coming out of like high stress at work and whatever those things are, like you're not going to respond well to it. So if we start with just kind of finding something where you can do the activity, you can do the weightlifting session, and then you feel like you can still go about your day and feel good and have energy for the rest of things, and picking up your kids and being present at work and all of those things, then it's like, great, let's see how your body responds to that first. Because a lot of times when we just like lessen that stimulus, so we make sure nutrition lines up with that, then it's pretty easy to lose, anywhere between like 4 to 8 pounds in a month. But it's not from you training the way that you used to train. I think that's something that people have to be very aware of. And the busier you are is the best time to focus on your health, because if you can do it when you're busy, going to be so much easier to do when you're not busy because you've already put those habits in place. And the habits that you have established as an ex-athlete were built when you were really busy as an athlete, and those habits still carry through now. So if you're waiting for things to slow down, it's like you already know how to change habits when you're busy. So why not just focusing on your health when you're busy? But from the actually building muscle perspective like that, having a program that doesn't overdo that stimulus, kind of resetting how your body responds to different stimulus, and then making sure that we're getting rid of any like aches and pains that may be left over from when you're an athlete is the easiest way to kind of be able to start to make some progress there. And we definitely can dive again, like full into that strength training side and like what that needs to look like. But the reality is like everyone's different because you have to make sure it's something that you enjoy and can stick to for the rest of your life versus something where you're going to do a really strict program for 6 weeks and then you're going to drop off. And that's, like, I think, the big difference you'll see between like an app structure versus actually having something that's built for you. And finally, the last step is just actually developing consistency over thinking about just being really intense all the time with what you're doing. If you're doing like high intensity bursts for fat loss and you're someone that like wants to lose 10, 20, 30 pounds fairly quickly, it's not going to help you if you're just doing like something really strict for a short period of time, then you drop off. I'd so much rather see you do something that you can be consistent with over a longer period of time and know you're going to get to your goal, you're going to maintain it, and then be able to continue progressing from there versus thinking like you just fully diving in for 6 weeks, getting where do you want to be, and then like that weight goes right back on. So focus on it being sustainable for you, something that you can enjoy, something that you actually feel like you have the freedom to choose what it is. Because one of the things that we typically notice with ex athletes, actually, it's very common that we notice with ex athletes, is you finish your sport and then you just look for something to replace it versus thinking something that's going to add to your life. And those are very different things. So you'll see like highly aerobic sports like, cross country or swimming or, any sport really, I guess. And they'll go into like marathons right away. They'll go into triathlons or tough mudders or something, that takes a lot of time and effort from their day. And it's because they're trying to fill the gap versus finding like what they actually truly enjoy. And I'm sure some people will say like, well, I just really enjoy like the rush of it or whatever, or the relief it gives me or the endorphins or whatever it is. And that's fine, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the thing that they would enjoy or get the most of or would supplement their life the best. And so it's more important to find that versus finding something just to replace your sport. Now, the other aspects that you have to think about when it comes to consistency is the activity you're doing. Can you actually recover from it? Is it helping you manage your stress or is it adding stress? And is it something that you look forward to versus feel like it's scheduled for you as something that you have to do? And there's going to be some people where like you don't enjoy exercise. And so you may still be able to find something that you enjoy, but your sport may have damaged that relationship for you. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to always enjoy the thing that you do, because the reality is like if you want to be in shape and you want to be fit and healthy, you're going to have to move. You're going to have to exercise. You have to know what you're doing nutritionally because it's not going to always come easy to you like you did as an athlete. But also understanding that just because you didn't enjoy exercise or your sport at the time doesn't mean you're not going to enjoy exercise or your sport forever. It's just rebuilding that relationship and finding a way for you to enjoy it. Now, you don't have to always do your sport either. For me personally, like I was a swimmer and I still, for 9 years after I graduated, I tried to swim like 2 to 3 times a week for most of that time. And I would like fit it in. But then after like 2 or 3 weeks, I just didn't want to do it. And I'd find a reason not to do it. And I realized like I need to stop trying to do my sport and start doing what I enjoy. And so now for me, it's a balance of like strength training, walking with my dog and my wife, and golf. And that's what I love to do. So yeah, like I may not be the most jacked person in the world, but I also love the sport that I get to spend time actually doing. I love the activities that I'm doing. And that's better for me versus, me continuing to swim, waking up at 4:30 in the morning to get into an open swim time at 5 o'clock and just feeling like I'm just kind of grinding through life and exhausted all the time, which is pointless. So now the last aspect of it is all of these things are very easy to talk about implementing and talk about doing. And you may do it for a week or two, or maybe you've been off and on for, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, or you've done it once and you dropped off before. And the thing we'll always hear is like, okay, like, well, I know what I have to do, or I know, how to train, or I know how to get fit, but then you don't actually do it. And that's where that accountability piece and having someone there to actually support you and make sure you're getting back on track and developing the right habits is important, because we can do anything for a short period of time. But I'll use the reference of swimmers, for example. Most swimmers, if you have a coach on all the time, like, don't pull in the lane line, don't pull in the lane line, don't pull in the lane line. I know swimmers are the only one that are going to know this, but the first time that there's like not a coach on deck, most of swimmers are probably going to pull in the lane line at least once. And I'll briefly explain what that means for a non-swimmer. So, you know, there's a pool, there's a rope across it where it has like little buoys on it, and it's so much easier to like pull the buoy to kind of get across the pool. And swimmers love like doing that. It's just like super satisfying to like kind of rip down the pool a little bit faster. And so they're always going to do that little habit when a coach isn't looking, or when you're swimming leisurely by yourself. And it's kind of thing that same thing when it comes to having that accountability piece there, where it's easy today to say, okay, like, I'm going to track my macros, or I'm going to do this workout consistently. And then you find yourself guesstimating for a few days, and then you find yourself thinking like, well, these obstacles came up, and so I'm not going to worry about it right now. Or I don't have the hour to do my workout, so I'm just not going to do it. Versus having that accountability there to be like, okay, well, like, the scenario may not be perfect, but let's still put the habit in place and we can still get better within a shorter period of time. And so having that role of someone that can hold you accountable, or a coach, or something to kind of help you reset and build those habits in place, is incredibly important early on. And that's where, like, for example, for us, we don't ever want someone to rely on us forever. Our goal is like, let's teach you the skills, habits, and coping mechanisms to maintain it. So that way you learn how to do that forever, versus you constantly being reliant on something to say, this is exactly what we're going to do for every single day of my entire life. Because the reality is, like, you're an adult, you should be able to maintain these things for you. So it's like, let's get those habits in place and then let's maintain that, versus you become reliant on something. And I think that's the big problem I have with a lot of like the group fitness style classes, is like, you're dependent on that to be fit. And if you can't make your group fitness class, you're not going to be healthy that day, you're not going to do anything in between. So you're just like becoming reliant. And so instead of just buying into a subscription where you can rely on something to like be in control of your health or a workout, or whether or not you do Murph or you do like some easier workout, like, it's decided by really no reasoning at all, versus you having structure in place to actually help you say, okay, well, these obstacles came up in my life today, how do I actually like still focus on my health even though nothing's perfect? And that's having the right skills in place to understand how to actually apply that to you. So, again, to recap, it's step one, really important to reset your metabolism, make sure that your energy levels are where they need to be, that your digestion's where it needs to be, and that you actually are feeling good and managing stress well throughout the day. Step two, finding an exercise program that's actually going to work for you and help you build muscle within the stimulus of what your day-to-day life looks like now, versus what your day-to-day life looked as an athlete, and understanding you don't have to put in that level of effort to be able to get the same results. And then the third step, finding a way to develop that consistency over having that like intense workout for a short period of time. So you want to find something that you can have that skill, coping mechanisms, and habits developed so they stay in place for forever, versus you doing a program for 30 days or 90 days or 6 months and then dropping off. You want to get those lifelong habits in place. So if you need like a strength training program, or you need like a base to start with, we have a really great strength training principles guide. So message me and I'll send that over to you as well. And then just think about, like, don't think about doing all three of those steps or everything within those steps all at one time. Focus on one thing that you can do to improve today, versus like trying to just like lay out this elaborate plan and do everything all at once. Start with one thing, change that, and then you can just add on top of that as you go, as you build habits. Now, if you find yourself where you've been struggling to improve your health for a long period of time, or you've kind of been wishy-washy and like doing all or nothing attempts, or you tried the group fitness classes, or you've tried any of those different methods, you're not really having the success, you want to lose 10 to 30 pounds now and know that you're going to continue to make progress and you're going to maintain that forever in a way that you can enjoy, go ahead and just send us a message on Instagram, and we'll talk about what it's like to kind of help you out and get you supported there. But thank you for tuning in today, and stay tuned for future podcasts.